This is a warning that we are very weak right now as a country, and we need to be prepared for lines to be possibly crossed, especially when it comes to our foreign adversaries. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, appear weak when you are strong, and appear strong when you are weak. Unfortunately, right now, we appear weak, and we are weak. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about how we are very weak right now as a country. And this is a warning that we need to prepare for lines to be crossed, especially when it comes to foreign adversaries. They are circling the water right now, and they can smell blood based on what's happening here in our country. And there's been a lot of political tension between other countries around the world in past years that have now got to a point of inflection based on the fact that everybody's struggling and everybody's desperate. And there's a lot of things leading to the concept that people find us weak. And when you're weak is when people tend to make decisions based on the fact that they feel they can be victorious. So, if you're preparing for things to possibly get worse, especially in the sense of our foreign policy and everything happening around the world, not just here in the country, then hit the subscribe button below so that way we can keep talking about it and we can try to prepare as best we can for all of these things to actually happen at some point, okay? So here's why we're so weak right now, and here's why our foreign adversaries are taking a look and probably right now writing up a strategy as what they would do if they decided they needed to enter a conflict with us, okay? So threats are both foreign and within. We all know that to be true. And right now what's happening in the country that gives us the appearance of weakness is a lot of different multifaceted things. But the biggest thing is the economy right now. Our economy is still struggling, okay? We are still dealing with the economic impact of what happened last year. And we are in a situation right now where jobless claims are higher right now, a year after everything started, than they ever were during the 2008 recession. So that should show you that even though things seem like they might be getting better, and even though things are occurring right now, they're allowing more people to go back to work or more people to not socially distance anymore or any of those other things, we are still in much worse situations than we were even 12 years ago. So keep that in mind. Things might seem like they're better, but when you actually compare them to historical reference, they actually are not, okay? The CDC is already considering to extend the eviction moratoriums that have been put into place to keep people in their homes that no longer can afford to be in those homes. And if that gets extended, it should just show you further how bad the economic situation is. And all it really does is put those people further and further in the red, puts the landlords further and further behind, and it just causes a snowball effect of nobody being able to keep caught up as to what's happening. Plus, yes, there was the stimulus checks, but keep in mind that those stimulus checks are a desperation plea. They are a last resort. It's not something that we're used to seeing from our government because they don't want to give us back any of our money. You know that as well as I do. But in the situation that we're dealing with right now in dire times, here's some free money, right? Free. But anyway, think of it that way. We are not in a good situation economically, and when a country is hurt economically, it looks like they are weak to the rest of the world, which means there could be a chance. So, other than the economy, we also still have extreme political divide within the country. Sure, the election season is over, but the divide has just gotten worse, and things are not going to magically improve. And in fact, I think you should assume they won't improve at all. Most likely they'll get worse. And there's a lot of different things happening politically that are pushing people further and further apart when it comes to that divide. If you take things like, let's say, gun control and censorship, and you add them together, that's going to equal tension. And that tension could eventually overspill into something worse. And other opponents around the world see what's happening within our country and say they can't even get it together within their own borders. So maybe it's not the worst idea for us to try to see what we can pull off while they're not looking or while they're dealing with their own problems. Understand that this is a weakness, and it's also permeating into things that really matter when it comes to the world stage, including our military. Our military is becoming very woke in recent months, and a lot of decisions are being made that aren't necessarily logical with the sense of being the tactical advantage in a situation. Most of the decisions being made now are purely political, and that is not a strong or smart way to run a military at all. Of course, diversity is good and creates a lot of different dynamic within any kind of an organization. However, when we're talking about the military in general, everything should go back to a logical sense of who's the best for this job in order to make sure that we succeed as the victor in case there's ever a conflict. That should be the only prerequisite for anything related to the military. But our country is not doing that anymore, and we're very vocal and very public about wanting to make all these changes to create some kind of a political atmosphere of righteousness, and it doesn't look good on the world stage. It might look good in the media, but when it comes to foreign adversaries, they see those things and say, that's weak, and we can handle that if we need to. Keep those things in mind. Some of these things are self-inflicted. Some of these things are caused by the media, which pushes the division within the country. And some of the things are out of our control in the sense of the economy. So that's what's happening within the country. But what's really going on everywhere else is even more problematic. And if you think about it, just as an example, like we have the situation with the other countries that we share borders with having an issue with immigration, and these immigrants that are showing up at the southern border are dealing with their own crisis because the new administration has refused to acknowledge it's an actual issue. And illegal immigration is something that is always going to be a big point of conflict. However, what's happening right now isn't making it any better. And in fact, now we're talking about even flying people from the southern border to the northern border by Canada just because, and that seems like a bad idea. In fact, all it's doing is spreading a problem around even more to cause more tension and more divide within the country. You can see these things happening, and this is a small example of how foreign countries are actually affecting us from within without even trying to. Now, wait until the foreign countries that want to affect us in a very negative way actually try to affect us that way, and may have already tried in many different ways, if you know what I'm saying. So, foreign policy is falling apart. Our leadership appears weak. And when I say that, I don't just mean our leadership appears weak in the sense of how we're handling business. Our leadership appears weak both physically, mentally, and in the manner that they are handling business. Everything about the current leadership is weak. There's a lot of division within the leadership. There's a lot of contradiction and hypocrisy, and it looks like nobody has anything figured out or together. And that being said, world leaders look at that and think, well, there you go, this is going to be easy. So think about this, okay? Our president is struggling right now in many, many ways. We all know that. So do all the world leaders. If you and I believe that we're having those issues right now, we know that everybody else thinks so too. So that being said, who's actually going to cause problems for us here in the future, and how are they causing problems possibly even right now? This is why we need to prepare. This is why I'm warning all of you about what's going on, because the sharks are in the water, and it's not looking good based on the fact that no situation is actually being put into place to try to prevent any of these issues from escalating. All we're seeing is things continually get worse and get fumbled further and further down the field without any kind of resolution in sight. So China, of course, is a huge issue. And China recently had talks with some of the administration and the staff there within about how we're going to handle our relations here in the future. And China has basically challenged the state of our democracy, saying that your democracy is not even working. You guys don't even know what you're doing, and even the people of your country no longer believe in it. And they use examples from all of the unrest and the chaos during the 2020 presidential election cycle to justify that concept. And that's in a rebuke to our Secretary of State Blinken, who basically went in there and said, look, there's a lot of concerns we have about China, the way they treat minority groups in the country, the way they treat other religions, the way that they are handling business affairs and everything else. And China basically laughed in their face and said, look, you don't even know how to run your own country. Don't come over here telling us what to do. Now, we know China is problematic, and we know that there's a good reason to be looking at them as a possible situation here in the future. But now they're getting to a point where they are emboldened to act this way towards our current leadership because of the fact that we look extremely weak. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to treat us like we are weak, and they are going to bully us into doing what it is they feel needs to be done. Don't forget about Taiwan as being a huge point of contention when it comes to the two countries trying to do business. China thinks of Taiwan as being theirs, and Taiwan thinks of them as being their own country. And that is going to be a big problem one of these days. And if China gets emboldened enough and feels like there really won't be many consequences from pulling off some kind of a move here and basically annexing Taiwan and proving to the rest of the world that it is their property, well, what are we going to do about it? Keep that in mind, okay? So moving on from China, look at what just happened with Russia. Recently on an interview, the president said that Vladimir Putin was a killer. Now, that's cutting it short and basically taking things from sentences and just cutting it easy for you to make it a little easier to speak about. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. And Vladimir Putin took it as an insult and said, look, you're going to call me a killer. There's going to be some consequences to that. You can't be insulting other world leaders. Well, that happens, and then here's what happens. They know the situation, and Russia knows exactly what's going on in our leadership right now. So he challenges the president to a face-to-face live stream, interview, debate, argument, whatever you want to call it, and says, look, the world would love to watch it. We can discuss things. You can tell me why you think I'm a killer, and we can try to work on our relationship as two countries. Now, we know that the current administration is going to deny said interview, but that's just going to keep furthering the idea that we're weak. And then Russia's going to say, look, we offered an interview. They didn't take it. Why? They're weak. These are problematic situations that are occurring right now that are going to eventually evolve into something worse because people are seeing things for what they are. And it is very disturbing in the sense of not wanting to see any kind of a global conflict. I don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. But there's still North Korea. And North Korea is also now bringing up the rhetoric again and saying, look, if this administration comes to North Korea and starts doing drills with South Korea and all these things, and they don't step lightly, well, there's going to be a bad 4 years up ahead, okay? Now, Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, basically said, don't come over here and screw with us. And by saying that, she basically put it out there that they don't even respect the current administration, and they're basically willing to ramp up all the rhetoric and get back on board with probably their nuclear testing program and their ballistic missile program, and they're going to keep pushing that envelope to see what they can or can't get away with. And they're already threatening to rip up the fragile military agreements between them and South Korea that we all know are basically just there as a facade, but they're there, and now they might not be if you don't tread lightly. So the threats are all coming from the other side at this point. Posturing is happening, and people are emboldened now to say, I don't really think you guys know what you're doing, and we're not really worried about you anymore. And of course, there's conflict all over the globe, and our country is definitely being looked at in a much more negative light as of right this second, and other countries also are suffering due to the economic impact of the crisis from last year. So when people suffer, they get desperate. And when people get desperate, they make rash decisions. And it's possible that one of these days soon, a rash decision could lead to something worse. Now, we also have our own rhetoric coming out saying, look, we're ready to fight right now. We're ready to fight tonight. We can go to war right this second, okay? Rhetoric like that is coming from our Secretary of Defense and all kinds of other people within the administration. However, I don't think that's the case. I really think that the saber rattling is just another tactic to appear strong when you're weak. Unfortunately, like I said in the beginning of this video, we appear weak and we are weak. And that should concern you. That's why we need to keep preparing. That's why we need to make sure that it's not just about what could happen here within our borders. It's about what could happen around the world based on everything going on right now. And what's going on right now is the world is looking at us and saying, that's not that big of a deal anymore. And that should concern you because for a long time, us being a big deal has kept a relative standard of peace, at least for those of us who live within this country. Whether or not you agree with everything else related to that topic is a different story. But when it comes to prepping and survivalism and trying to stay alive and not wanting to see some kind of a global conflict, that was a better situation than what we have right now. So, I want you all to think about everything that I just talked about. And I want you to start doing your research, reading the news, find alternative news sources, not just the mainstream media, because they're a big problem for us here in the country. They are dividing us and causing a lot of why there's this weakness. So we need to make sure we find alternative sources, but all of these things are just happening right now, like this week. And that should concern you because You don't usually see this much rhetoric from foreign adversaries directed directly at our administration saying, you're weak. So, if you have anything else to add, comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you know of any other situations happening around the world right now that show our weaknesses. And let me know if you think that we're currently very weak and that we need to figure out a different way to approach what's happening around the world, okay? So, without anything else to say about how we're really weak right now, and we need to be prepared for things to possibly cross the line, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.